It has got to be one of the weirdest stories I have come across, but it is a story about the absolute effectiveness, not of Ron DeSantis, but of the constituents, of you, me, and we, of the people who've been saying, you know what, this insanity that we're living through, this constant scolding from the political left, this abuse of children in every way, and then telling parents that they're not allowed to have a say in their kids' education, none of this is going to fly. This doesn't work. This is no way to live, people. We can't have this. And so what we're seeing is that pushback. And that explains the story out of the Washington Post. Guys, welcome to the show. Good to be with you. Presented by Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org. Economic liberty, free speech. This is what they do, people. That's why I'm a fan. Here was the headline. Over there, this was Fox News telling the story. Liberals whine, I love the use of the word whine, that Iowa is becoming Florida of the North. And I was like, what are you talking about? Sure enough, there's the story. Iowa's sharp right turn from centrist state to Florida of the North. And of course, they want to make that this is all an attack on the LGBTQ community. No, it's not. And that should come to an end, because the argument in Iowa, in my beloved Indiana, a lot of places where we're seeing a lot of legislation going on right now, has nothing to do with being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. It all has to do with the T, and specifically has to do with children. It has to do with adults thinking that children can somehow change their gender, or decide to have surgeries, or decide to take puberty blockers, or don't have to listen to their parents, or the parents shouldn't even be allowed to know what happens with the kids, and the parents shouldn't know what's happening in the schools. The parents should have no say in education whatsoever, no say in what their kid is doing in the school, whether or not their kid is engaging a totally secret life within the school because they've been pushed into it. I know I said that really fast, but that's how quickly it comes out these days. That's how quickly you realize all of the things that are happening, because there are so many things happening. Boom, 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 boom. And it has to come out, just pours right out of you when you realize how obscene this all is. That the reality is that none of this is about people who are lesbian or gay or bisexual. This is all about the T. This is all about children. And the idea that somehow they can be pushed, or are being pushed, and they are being pushed into this kind of confusion. Because the level of children saying I'm this or I'm that, this doesn't comport to any level of science. This only comports to social contagion. That's it. That's the totality of it. From the beginning to the end, the alpha to the omega, that's all there is. That what you're seeing in schools across America, in society across America, is social contagion being pushed by adults who are really into the social contagion. Iowa is becoming Florida is a fantastic headline, because that headline states that it turns out that politicians are doing their job. You say to me, how does it work like that? Well, allow me to break it down. Allow me to share it with you. The politician, I should really start here. Do you know the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer? I was a restaurant manager for a short while at the Hard Rock Cafe in Washington, D.C. And I want to say that the regional director, regional VP, district manager, whatever his name was, I want to say his name was Adam. I have no idea where he is today, but he should know that this left an imprint on me. And I was in a miserable place when I went to work there. I was depressed and everything else. It was really at the, my gosh, I have to start doing something about this. My gosh, there's no reason to go on. It was super ugly stuff. He asked me in the interview, do I know the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat? And I completely blanked. I blanked, and I tried, and I believe I eventually said, no, I don't know. A thermometer measures temperature. A thermostat creates it, raises it, lowers it. That's what happens. The thermometer only measures, the thermostat actually controls it. Politicians are nothing more than thermometers. They are measuring the temperature. We, the people, are the thermostat. We raise the heat or lower the heat. What matters and what doesn't. We choose this. We do this. For years. You know, the article discusses that Iowa was a state that went for Obama in 2008 and went for Obama in 2012. Yes, but that was over 10 years ago. And in today's America, Barack Obama would be considered too much of a centrist to get elected by these progressives. And over the last 10 years, and really over the last 20 years, truly over the last 30 years, it's been nonstop abuse of the American people at the hands of the political left. You're racists, you're bigots, you're sexist, you're not paying enough in taxes, you're not caring enough about your fellow man, you're not paying your fair share. Every day is a reason why you're a bigot and you're an awful person. Every day you're being told why you're a sexist and why what you did in asking that woman out was a total affront and you should be sued and it's akin to rape or anything else that got said. Every day, every day, every day, Americans were abused. My father is 85 and my father still works. Father has a small business, merchant services, credit card processing. If you need any help, let me know. And that was a nice little bit of advertising right in there. And he's still working, still paying his taxes. When does my father stop being called? When does it stop that he's called a racist? And when can he be told, hey, thanks for all you contributed? Because you contributed much more than the vast majority of people. Like, for example, you've contributed more to the tax base than Bernie Sanders ever has. Bernie Sanders went from being the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, to a congressman in Vermont, to a senator in Vermont. And the only thing he ever actually did was marry a woman who bankrupted a college in Vermont. That's the grand total of what it is Bernie Sanders has created. My father has at least paid people. My father has created income that he's paid taxes on. When does he get a break? When does he get a thank you? When does he get told, you know what? You've done enough. We won't yell at you today. It never comes. It never comes. They're always yelling at him. He's always terrible. He's always awful. You're always terrible. You're always awful. But when it came to a head, it's a really interesting, you could argue, difference between men and women, because this was an attack on men, manhood, masculinity for years. And men continue to go to work and raise their families. But then the left decided, why are we waiting until college to screw with people's children? Why don't we just do it right now when they're in the 7th grade? And mom said, I'm sorry, what now? And they said no. And the minute they said no, in a loud enough voice, they got called domestic terrorists. Bam! I mean, that's pretty damn quick. That is pretty damn quick from, hey, we don't like what we're seeing in our kids' school. Hey, we got questions about what's in the school library, to domestic terrorist. Wow. That is some maneuvering, folks. So you've seen the acceleration of the disgust of the push from the left to tell you why you're always terrible all the time. Politicians who have a brain, who are sensing the ground under them, look at that and say, I should react and respond to that. We should be clear that Ron DeSantis of Florida certainly has his own mind, certainly has his own thoughts, certainly has his own theories and beliefs, and I don't think there's any question about whether or not he's somebody who's like, you know what, I'm not going to put up with this. You know what, I'm not going to simply allow the beaches to be closed because of COVID. You know what, I'm not going to listen to this one, that one, or the other one. And people cheer that. They love that. They love the fighter. They're only begging for more people to fight. They're begging for their governor to fight. I live in Indiana. I would love it upon love it upon love it if my governor would fight. If Eric Holcomb, the governor of Indiana, would fight, that would be fantastic, because we've got the same types of legislation conversations going on as they do in Iowa. We're saying that boys are not girls and girls are not boys, and that parents have a right to know what's happening, and that boys do not participate in girls' sports. That is a bill that the governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, vetoed. He had to get an override from the General Assembly. Yes, the Republican governor Eric Holcomb engaged a veto on the idea when presented with boys should not play girls sports. Well, this really isn't an issue here. And the Indiana High School Athletic Association, known as the IHSAA, they govern these things. And so, no, we don't really need this. We don't really have this problem here. Instead of saying the citizens see this as an issue, I should be listening to them. He didn't see the problem. So veto and did away with it. For whatever reason, Governor Eric Holcomb is not interested in engaging in any social issue at all except abortion. He was very strong in saying we're going to have restrictions on abortion in the state of Indiana. But he did not really discuss it well with the Republican Party, so you created more of a mess than you needed to. That's about bad leadership, because the Republican Party, while it's a supermajority in the state of Indiana, what they don't have is any cover. They don't have anybody protecting them. They don't have anybody helping out there to move their message. Their governor is silent. The leader of the party is quiet. Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, less so. She's less quiet. Is she somehow modeling herself after Ron DeSantis? I don't know if that's true, but is she listening to her constituents and realizing that there's a very loud group of people out there saying, leave our kids alone? Yeah. And she's doing it right. And when you see anybody, and again, this is the Wall Street Journal right here. Here's how they start. Where was it? Even as teens draped in rainbow flags crowded into the Capitol Rotunda chanting, "We say gay" on March 8th, Iowa lawmakers quickly passed 3 bills related to gay and transgender rights. Now, I'm not sure of every piece of legislation. I am sure that no one's talking about the LG or B. This is all about the T. And what has happened is people have said that if you are LG or B, you have to be involved with the T. Otherwise, you don't count. Otherwise, you're not really gay. If you were somebody who was fighting at Stonewall, you might want to look up Stonewall. You'll look up Lower Manhattan. You'll learn about that. Those were real fights, fighting for real rights. Those people have been totally pushed to the side because, just like Barack Obama 10 years later, they're not really left enough, liberal enough, I don't know, gay enough. If you ask some people, not me. I think you are who you are, and I'm cool with that. I think children can't decide their gender. Children can't decide their medical histories, and anybody who says otherwise is abusive. Of course it's abusive if you say parents shouldn't have a right. Of course it's abusive if you say parents shouldn't know. Of course it's abusive if you say, well, they could take puberty blockers. It's fine. It's reversible. It's reversible. You take a puberty blocker for 3 or 4 years, you physically change and chemically change the makeup of the human body, and you think that's reversible? What kind of freak believes in this? What kind of freak believes in that level of insanity? That's nuts. Certifiable on every level. Iowa has realized, or their governor has realized, that indeed what the people want is somebody listening to them and then acting accordingly. What they want is to protect children, because children are not adults, and children need to be protected more often than not from themselves. And there are people out there who are absolutely abusing children through this guise of gender affirming care. The whole concept of gender affirming care is to make you believe that somebody can affirm their gender, which means physically alter who they are. That's a radical concept, and children need to be protected from that. And parents and adults and rational people all across America have said children have got to be protected from that, because this is nuts. And then what do they get called? They get called bigots, and they get called transphobes, and they get called every other thing under the sun, when they are none of these things. And when you see these pieces of legislation, they go, oh, it's just anti this and anti that, when actually it is pro-children. It is pro-common sense. It's pro-decency. It's pro-parent. These are good, important things. Is Iowa becoming Florida? I don't think so. I think Iowa has just found its voice. And in many ways, my beloved Indiana has just found its voice. Maybe Ron DeSantis was the first to giving that voice a voice. Just like people would say Trump was the first to give that voice. These disgruntled, unhappy people who've been called awful, horrible, evil names for years, finally giving them a voice. Man, it feels great when you realize you're not alone. It does. It feels magnificent when you realize you're not alone. And as more and more Americans have learned, when it comes to protecting their children, when it comes to caring for their children, when it comes to caring for anybody's kids, they're not alone. These abusers can't get away with what they want to do. And parents are fighting back. Adults are fighting back. And politicians are listening. And if that means that Iowa is becoming Florida, I hope Indiana's next. And I hope your state is next as well. Guys, I appreciate you being here, being a part of the show. And my thanks to Americans for Prosperity. AmericansForProsperity.org, economic liberty, free speech. They sponsor this thing. And then I get to do this thing. And this thing is pretty awesome. So I do it. Now, I got to go do a radio show. So you can catch me, Tony Katz, today, noon to 3. I do a morning show in Indianapolis on WIBC, and then I do a midday show that then is slowly being heard across the country. Then I do the Cigar and Bourbon show. I do a host of things. So you can listen to WIBC.com, and you might even hear this conversation right here. And don't forget, if you need a good gift, my book, Let's Go Bourbon. It's delicious. It is the bourbon reader you've always needed. Check that out at Amazon.com. Let's Go Bourbon. It's good stuff. Guys, I will catch you later.